This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we have as our guest tonight two of the best political consultants and political minds in the state, Jack Cambell and Barron Coleman. Fellas, good to have you on the show.
Thank you, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
Jack and Barron have formed a partnership as political consultants here in Montgomery, and Jack, of course, has got a few years on Barron. Not as many as I do, but Jack has been around Alabama politics, especially Republican Party politics, for several decades now. We were getting that after a while. And Barron is a young 35-year-old attorney, brilliant political mind with 5 children. So Barron's a good family man, and not to say that Jack and I aren't.
I have a dog.
Anyway, we've got to have these guys on the show. What I want to talk about, too, is they have started a very popular radio show. Tell our viewers how to tune in and what y'all's plans are for the radio show. Talk shows are very popular here in Montgomery because, as we talked about before the show, Montgomery is such a political town that, and it seems like the political talk shows here in Montgomery are more in tune and have more accuracy and not so much ideologically driven as the ones in Birmingham. The ones in Birmingham seem to be following the national ideological, let's see how right-wing mean we can be, whereas y'all, I think, really know more about politics than some of those Birmingham talk show guys do. I know you do, but tell our viewers, if you will, Barron, about y'all's show, and you and Jack can go into that.
It's called News and Views from 9 to noon. It's on from 9 to noon every day, Monday through Friday. It's on News Talk 93.1 in Montgomery. You can get it on TuneIn Radio, smartphone app. You can get it on newstalk931.com. Pull it up, listen live. Podcast it every day. They put it on the Facebook page for the website for the radio station. So.
How'd y'all come up with this idea? You thought there was a need for it here in Montgomery, another talk show?
We were just sitting around talking one time. We said, we ought to get on the radio. And so Barron actually got approached by somebody who's in radio and said, we have a slot to fill. Would you like to come in and take a 3-hour deal? And we, of course, didn't know how hard that was going to be, but we decided to do it. And we wanted to make it more conversational, less bombastic. We don't want to be confrontational to our guests. Our goal is, if we have you on, and we've had you on, we want you to have enough fun where you want to come back. And you were one of our best guests so far, so we appreciate that.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. We ought to get to do it at least once a month.
Yeah, we should.
Talk about different things, because politics never ends.
It does.
It never ends. But y'all are going to talk about not just state politics, but local politics and even issues in Montgomery.
Yeah. Today we somehow got off on a tangent about old drive-in restaurants in Montgomery. So we talk a little bit about social, cultural, and political news and issues, and we're really having fun.
You probably learn a lot from your listeners, don't you? I mean, we call about the radio.
Some of the folks calling in are very knowledgeable. We've got a wide range of people that have been in and out of politics. We've had a lot of guests come in. We've learned a lot.
Who all of y'all had on so far that y'all find interesting?
Well, a guy named Steve Flowers.
Yeah, we've had Steve Flowers on, who was one of our better guests. We had George Wallace Jr. on, talking about the book that he's written about his father and his life as the son of somebody famous. We had a lady named Mary Hampton, who's a Russian history and governmental affairs expert out at Maxwell, who was on and talked about Putin and his relationship with the rest of the world and with his own people, which I found fascinating. We had a caller today that said, I really like it more local, but we want to bring in as much, because she's a part of Montgomery and has decided to stay here and teach. And who are some of the other people?
We've had Joe Hubbard, who's the current state rep in Montgomery, Democrat nominee for Attorney General. Had Arch Lee, a city councilman. Had Mayor Todd Strange. Kevin
Griffith.
Murphy. Yeah,
Good.
Parker Griffith.
Nominee for governor, Democrat.
You know, talking about that, about Montgomery politics, after this year's election, which is pretty dull, as y'all will admit, I mean, there's not many good races, haven't been, and I said that 2 years out. It looked like Bentley was going to get a free ride, basically, and I'm not saying Parker Griffith's not a good candidate. He's a viable candidate. I just think that Bentley's going to win easily, and then, so you really don't have many good races, and you haven't had, but looming after this general election, y'all will have a mayor's race, which should be pretty interesting here in Montgomery.
It will be. It's going to be in 2015. We have them in the
Yeah.
odd years. It'll be, I think, in August 2015.
So they'll start running as soon as this thing's over.
Well, Arthur Davis, who's a former congressman from the 7th District, grew up in Montgomery, has announced he wants to run. Todd Strange is kind of in the camp, out of the camp on re-election. Hadn't decided yet. I think he's just kind of waiting to see. Some other names mentioned.
Greg Calhoun's been mentioned.
Greg Calhoun told me himself he was looking at it.
And
Yeah.
Kevin Murphy. We had Chief Kevin Murphy, Montgomery Police Chief, who had some conflict
Yeah.
with Todd
A
Strange.
little acrimonious relationship with the
Yeah.
current leadership.
It
He's
was.
looking at running. So it ought to be a very spirited race.
I think it will be. That'll be something y'all will have fun doing. That'll be a good thing for next year.
It will be.
Give y'all some fodder.
And there'll be several good city council races, too.
That's right.
Yeah, 4 or
Arch will
5
be
of
running
them, I
next
think.
year. All the councilmen run next year.
Right, they'll all be up at the same time, the mayor's race.
Let's go back and don't get the cart ahead of the horse, but back to this year's elections. You know, Jack, you have been around talking about mayor stuff. If you can, give our viewers how long you've been in the Republican trenches. Your daddy was a political lawyer here in Montgomery, and you grew up in state politics. in
Yeah, and I
Montgomery.
actually have a first cousin who was Speaker Pro Tem, Jim Cambell, who's an avowed Democrat, but I was always Republican. My first race was in 1982 when Emory Farmer ran for governor against George Wallace.
Emory's a Troy boy, originally.
Emory is a Troy boy. Farmer family's an old name down in Pike County. He was a 22-year mayor of Montgomery. At the time, he had been mayor for 6 years. Had a big following. Had a very spirited relationship against Joe Reed and some of the black community here in Montgomery, and I think that really helped cost him the governor's race, because George Wallace had patched up his relationship with the blacks from his past history of standing in the schoolhouse door and other things. And Emory started the race at about 38%, and he ended the race at about 38%. He just, with all the money he spent, really never connected. Never
He got about
moved.
38%.
Yeah,
I forgot.
which was kind of your base Republican vote. He never really broke beyond that. And plus Wallace, you had a lot of old people who were still conservative, and Emory was probably even more conservative than Wallace in that election, but the old guard wanted to give Wallace one more time.
He did. Barry, you don't remember that race, do you?
I was 3.
Then 86, did you get involved in the guy hunt thing in 86?
I did. I was a volunteer for Guy. He ran, you remember Fob James was governor from 82 to 86.
Yeah.
Decided not to run again. I'm sorry.
Wallace couldn't run. Wallace
and
couldn't run.
He couldn't run.
There was a Braddock Baxter debacle.
That's right. And then, if you remember in that election, Braddock won the runoff against Baxley, but there was enough evidence of Republicans voting in the runoff that the Democrat leadership said, well, you know what, we're not going to take the results at the polls. We're going to nominate Bill Baxley because we really think he should be the gubernatorial nominee. And it set off a firestorm. And Guy Hunt, a little-known probate judge from Coleman County, who didn't have a Chinaman's chance, as they said back then, actually won pretty handily, won by about 8 or 9 points.
Well, Baxley and Braddock had shot themselves in the foot.
They had.
And that bite. And,
But I was involved in that race.
hand picking of Baxley was the coup de grace.
Yeah, it was.
A lot of people say that was one of the death knells of the Democratic Party.
I think it certainly spurred the growth of the Republican Party in Alabama. We'd been voting Republican presidential campaigns, but not really on the state level. And this was the first time that we'd elected a governor. Now, none of the other constitutional officers went Republican, but the governor did.
And then Hunt won his own in 90.
He did against Paul Hubbard,
right,
head of the Alabama Education Association.
Won his own, and in 94, little Jim lost Fob again.
Yeah, he did.
And then Fob came back in 98 was when Siegelman and Riley ran, wasn't it?
No. Siegelman beat Fob in
that's
98.
right, beat Fob. That's right.
And those who were close, and I wasn't involved in that race, but that Fob James just really didn't have it in him. He just really, at the end, he got the nomination. He'd had a very spirited campaign against Red Blunt, and Guy Hunt had run again.
And
young
Ann
Blunt, Bedsole had
Blunt,
run, a senator from Mobile. And I think that Fob was tired after that primary, and they said that he just didn't really, his heart wasn't in it, and Siegelman worked mighty hard and ran on the lottery issue, if you remember, and beat him. So it was.
That was the last Democratic governor we've had.
Yeah.
Do you know, Jack, and you probably we shouldn't say this, but I almost think that 2 men in my lifetime have had a raw deal. I think Hunt got done wrong by getting prosecuted, but I also thought Don Siegelman got a bad deal on that thing. Don Siegelman really shouldn't be in jail. He never even made a dime off that thing.
I would agree with you on that.
I mean, Siegelman, bless his heart, he's in federal prison, and he all Scrooge did was give money for a lottery.
And that Guy Hunt was kind of a product of his handlers. John Grenier, who was kind of pulling the puppet strings, had set up an inaugural committee that took corporate money to fund the inaugural and all the festivities with it. Guy ended up, I think, pocketing the leftover money and spent it on some things that people thought were questionable. And some people don't think that the instructions that Judge Randy Thomas gave the jury were accurate. And a jury convicted him. And once you're convicted, you're removed from office immediately. And Guy had to step down. And Jim Folsom, as you know, as lieutenant governor, became governor.
I was in the house, and that was just shocking. I walked in my office, and they said, the governor's been convicted.
It was a shock. I was living in Texas at the time, but I was floored. And Siegelman, the same thing. I mean, you're right. Siegelman never really made any money off being governor. And maybe some of the folks around him did. I don't know.
And Jack, you know, if you, in political science class, Barron y'all probably majored in political science. In political science class, they actually textbooks tell you how are ambassadors of China and Japan and England selected. They're people who give big contributions to presidential campaigns.
Right,
That's how
exactly.
The textbooks say that's how you get a, and so Scrooge gives money to a lottery. Well, what do you expect him to do? Get put on board? George Wallace said, who do you think I'm going to give the job to, my enemies?
Right.
I mean, you know, it's like, you know, that's, if it had been his campaign, it had been closer, but here it was for a lottery. It wasn't, I mean, Siegelman wouldn't make anything off of it.
Right.
There's no quid pro quo. There's no money to be made in this thing.
I remember Dr. Will Waller, who was a urologist here in Montgomery, wanted to be ambassador to Luxembourg after Ronald Reagan won president. He had been a big George Bush supporter, had raised a lot of money, given a lot of money, but guess who got it? A guy from Miami University of Ohio who had given more money to Ronald Reagan, became the ambassador to Luxembourg. So that's kind of the way it works in presidential campaigns. And but you got to watch it in state politics.
Jack, you remember when everybody who runs a Republican would get branded as a ritzy silk stocking?
Yeah.
Now it's not like that, but originally when everybody would run against Mountain Brook and
the Rockefeller Republicans.
Rockefeller,
they were the rich wing of the party.
And actually, Emory got tattooed with that in '82.
Well, and
he
probably for good
reason. He was considered a rich Montgomery Republican, and the old saying was, a rich man's segregation will never beat a poor man's segregation in Alabama.
That's right.
That's about both of them were segregations, but Wallace was a poor man's segregation.
You know, but to Ronald Reagan's credit, he appealed to people who were not the country club wing of the party. You know, he appealed to people who worked at the gas station, at the grocery store, and you know, who were clerks in convenience stores and things like that. That was the Ronald Reagan crowd. And he kind of broke that mold.
He broke it. Let me tell you a story about that that was funny. You know, I ran as a Democrat. When I ran, I had friends who were Republicans and Democrats. I really wasn't that partisan. I'd been a young Republican and then ran as a Democrat, but I was friends with Howell Heflin. And Heflin, I had never served, I don't know if I told y'all that story or not, I never served with a finer man in my life than Bill Cadmus from Mountain Brook.
Yeah.
But if there's any old money in Birmingham, there is in Mountain Brook, and Bill Cadmus from an old money family. Cadmus's family had found that old Cadmus Johnson law firm in Birmingham, which is a silk stocking law firm. His great-grandfather found it, so he was a couple of generations of old money. And he was so wealthy, his family, the Cadmuses in Birmingham, were so wealthy, they had a home in Kennebunkport, Maine, next to the Bushes. The Bushes were old aristocratic New England money, and and Cadmus was neighbors with Bush growing up. George Bush Sr. Yeah. Anyway, and Bush's grandfather had been Prescott Bush, who was a U.S. Senator from Connecticut. Anyway, Cadmus was one of the finest men I ever served with. We both were pro-business, and we were fighting tort reform at the time. That was the only issue in the 80s. We all had tort reform was the issue. And so Cadmus was one of the nicest men, total gentleman, was a state senator from Mountain Brook, the seat Jabo's in now. Anyway, Cadmus was going to take a plunge against Heflin for the U.S. Senate. And as y'all know, being political strategist, if you're an incumbent and you've got unlimited funds and name identification, someone challenges you, you've got to identify them negatively before they get out of the gate.
Very early.
Yeah, go ahead and just pop them. You know, say, this guy, whatever you want to tattoo him with, hit him. You know, And so they, Hefford had gotten Squire Eskew and Carter Eskew and Bob Squire, the best political consultant who had managed Clinton's campaign. They were the meanest and best.
They were mean, big and mean.
The meanest and best there were, Squire and Eskew. And who was the pollster? I can't remember his name, but anyway, Hart.
Yeah.
He had Peter Hart and he had Squire Eskew, the meanest consultant, the meanest pollster. And they were a team. And Hefford had asked me to be his South Alabama campaign manager. I was unopposed in my legislative seat, so he says, Tree, won't you help me in my race for the U.S. Senate? I said, I'd love to, Judge. So I got to go back and go to the meeting about the strategy for the run against cabinets with those two guys. He said, come to Washington, I want you to be in the meeting and hear what they got to say about it, Tree. I want you to be involved in it. And they were sitting around saying what a consultant would say to you, that you got to identify someone negatively. They said, what are we going to hit cabinets with? And they said, well, I don't know. We'll have to think about it. We'll go back. We'll hit him something. And Hefford sat back in the back room and said, I know what we'll hit him with. And they said, what is it, Judge? I ain't got to ask anybody a doggone question. We'll just say my opponent, Mr. Cabanis, is one of those Gucci shoe wearing, Rolex watch wearing, Kennebunkport, Maine vacationing, Grey Poupon mustard dipping, Richie Rich Mercedes driving Mountain Brook Republicans.
Well, you know, the same strategy worked for Jim Folsom
exactly.
against Luther
Same
Strange,
thing.
When they ran both
Mountain Brook Country Club.
They called them Mountain Brook Country Club. Played tennis, the Mountain Brook Country Club.
You know, Mountain Brook tried for years, you may remember this, to pass a school tax just for their own school. For 10 years, our Constitution is so antiquated that you have to put everything on the ballot to raise your school property tax. If you want to do it, you got to put it on the state. Mountain Brook wanted to raise their own property tax for their own school. It failed for 10 consecutive elections because it had Mountain Brook on it. Did you know that? They had to find some way to raise their own property tax for the schools.
That's always a good issue.
But now this election has had some pretty good legislative races. I mean, even though there was not any good state races on the thing, Bentley had no opposition. But
yeah, when the most interesting race is Jim Ziegler versus Dale
it
Peterson
was.
for auditor.
It really was.
That was kind of a battle of names. It was weird.
I told y'all on your show that day, I think that job will be somebody y'all know the auditor is. You never knew who Sam Shaw was.
That's right.
I told her, Sam, you're the most innocuous state official I've ever seen in my life.
You probably had $25 or $30 million though spent on legislative races, which is a high primary.
Yeah,
number.
it was.
You had a couple of races top $1 million between them.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, Tom Watley and Andy Carter.
Go over those, Barry, because you were involved in some of those races. Doesn't the Senate,
Tom Watley spent about $600,000 on his Senate
Tell
seat.
everybody where those seats are in East Alabama.
That runs from Alex City to Phoenix City.
Yeah.
State Senate, 3 counties. Talladega County.
Who challenged him over
Tallahassee
there?
County. Andy Carter.
Yeah. I heard early on Carter might beat him, but it didn't come out that way.
I think it ended up being 5 points, give or take, maybe 6.
And then tell us about some other tough Senate races, then some House races.
Well, tough Senate race up there, Steve Livingston and Todd Greason. That was an open seat for.
I figured Greason would win that seat.
Everybody did.
Everybody thought so.
I thought Greason would win that seat.
Everybody did, and I think he probably was winning. Steve Livingston, who's a good candidate and will be a fine senator, his wife unfortunately passed 3 or 4 weeks before that, and it sort of put everything on hold.
Oh.
And Todd actually called me that day. He said, "No, I've never had this happen to me." And I said, "Well, I've never had it happen to me either." We asked
Has
around.
she been sick for a while?
Yeah,
she'd
had
been
cancer,
sick.
I think.
Yeah, and she finally passed, and that was a bad deal. And you know, I think he got a little natural bump as anybody would be expected to get, and I think it may have pushed him over the top, and he was gaining momentum at all the right time anyway.
The more surprises were in some of the House races where some of the incumbents were beaten.
I think the biggest was Mac Buttram up in Coleman.
Mac Buttram.
I have
Coleman.
never seen. I spent some time in the Jefferson County viewing audience, and I saw that ad. Mac Buttram had almost as many ads on television.
He spent for a House race about $500,000.
He was almost
unheard of.
He was almost having as many ads as the congressional candidates were.
Yeah.
Palmer
in Birmingham.
And Palmer.
And his opponent was a 29-year-old mayor of Good Hope, and Mac had been a one-term state representative from Coleman proper, and the mayor beat him by almost 10 points. It was, despite the fact that 39 state representatives went to Coleman, Republicans, to campaign against or campaign for Mac Buttram. Governor Riley came, the Speaker of the House came. to show support for Buttram. But I think people up there said, you know, we don't want all these outsiders coming in here telling us how to vote.
Jack, I heard you either on the V or some other thing say that, and I have written this repeatedly. It is true every time. A person does not, Alabamians don't like someone getting in someone else's race. If you are governor and Barron's running for the state senate, you don't want him for you. People resent that. Yeah. They say, I elected you to this job, and you got enough audacity to ask me to vote. George Wallace never could do it.
It permeates beyond the legislative races. Go back to the 2012, or I guess early 2013 race for the Republican chairman. That's exactly what happened there. Bill Armistead was very unpopular among a lot of Republicans. The governor's picking up the phone. His handlers are picking up the phone. Mike Hubbard, Bob Riley, Del Marsh, they're all picking up the phone calling, telling all the state committee members, you need to vote for Matt Friday, not Bill Armistead. Matt Friday loses by 100 votes.
Barron, it's happened long before that. As Jack and I can tell you.
Well, I know, but going back to about 2004, 2006, Randy McKinney was on the State Board of Education, and he was running for the state senate seat that Tripp Pittman now holds. Right. And Bob Riley pulled out all the stops, campaigned openly for Randy McKinney, and Tripp won that race.
It's happened for years.
It has.
When George Wallace tried to help someone get elected in his prime, Alabamians have an independent streak about them that they think, I don't want you telling me, you stay in your own race. You mind your own business, and that's not. It backfires.
It does.
It didn't just to help, it backfires.
Well, the only time I've ever seen it be successful is a race that probably was going to have the same outcome anyway, was Mike Hubbard's representative District 79 this time. The weekend before, I think it was, or the week or two before, Bob Riley, Mike Rogers, several people came down and knocked on doors in Auburn. But they didn't make a big deal about it. They just did it. And so I think if you're you're in Auburn and Bob Riley's at your front door saying, hey, vote for my friend Mike Hubbard, maybe that's not going to turn you off the same way as the organized structure of some of these other things that they do back
for Mac Buttram, they had a big rally, and they had, had a lot of publicity, and they had a very, very poor turnout for it. They said like 60 people outside of the folks that were there participating actually came to the event. So
that was
that
was an area too where 3 incumbent Republicans lost in Blount, Walker, and Coleman County, right there together, right north of Birmingham.
That's a very independent part of the state.
Yeah, Richard Bond, who was a one-term state representative from Walker, Winston County, went down, and so did Bill Roberts in Jasper and Walker County. He was a one-term state rep. He went down. Despite all the money that Bob Riley's PAC spent on their behalf, they all lost by pretty comfortable margins.
2 state senators who live in that area who I think have got a great future, that are real popular in their district, and is I think Cam Ward, and I think that Greg Reed from Walker County have excellent futures. Both those guys are extremely popular and have done a good job.
Well, both ran unopposed this time,
That's right.
which ought to tell you they're pretty strong in their respective areas. Greg Reed's a one-term state senator from Jasper, very well liked down here by the lobbyists, by his voters, by the people back home.
I agree.
I've been up there and been with Greg, and everybody knows him. And Cam Ward, the same thing. Cam is wildly popular.
You got some in that group that I think have got great.
Paul Sanford in Huntsville.
Exactly. And I think Tripp's got a future if he wants it. I think
Tripp Pittman, no question,
could have a future. You got a bunch of them in that Senate who got a lot of potential. If he were ambitious, I don't think he is. Brubaker here, could be a good candidate. I mean, we're talking about being unopposed.
Well, some people suggested Dick Brubaker, and Barron can speak better to this. They're pretty good friends. He's considering a run for governor, maybe.
Well, I'm saying Brubaker could have a great possibility. He's got great name ID. I mean, statewide, I don't know about, but in this area. But I mean, he ran unopposed. I mean, he ran for an open seat unopposed.
He would have a massive base of the entire river region. It wouldn't just be Montgomery. It'd be Elmore, Autauga, and even probably going back even towards Lee County.
He would, and he is a very unassuming guy. I mean, he doesn't come across as being so ambitious. He comes across as being somebody that really wants to do a good job as a state senator.
He's very conscientious and very smart.
Yeah, he
very,
really
very smart.
Went to Vanderbilt, didn't he?
Yeah.
Or Swanee? Which one of those?
He went to
two?
Vanderbilt.
Okay.
Oh, we went to Alabama, Steve.
That's
I
right.
mean,
That's right.
Barron
The
went to Auburn.
university.
It was a fun time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Oh,
I see Jackie football games all the time.
yeah, those were the days, Steve.
Well, we weren't as good as we are now, though, in football. We were pretty good, though, for a while.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's get off and back to politics. Talking about this region's races, the Chambliss Garner race was one that was watched in our area pretty closely, but Chambliss ran away with that thing.
He did.
I think it was a regional thing. I think there were more votes in Ottawa County where Elmore.
Well, if you take a line and just divide it in half, cut the district and just fold the map in half, there are about 63% of the votes on this side of the map, about 37 on this side, and that's about the way the votes fell.
Even though, and we've only got about 3 minutes left, I'll get your take on this in Jack's second. Barron, even with the change in some faces in the House and Senate, there have been some change in faces, not a lot of them. The numbers are going to stack out about the same, aren't they?
As far as the Republican-Democrat
Right,
numbers,
numbers.
the Republicans may even pick up a few seats in
about
the Senate.
70-35 in the House, you think, right about there when it's all over.
Give or take, yeah.
And then the Senate, Harry Ann's just sitting there by herself. She's an independent, but you got, what would it be, 14?
Tammy Iron's seat up in the Shoals, you could see change from D to R.
I think 22 could change.
22 could go from D to R. Yeah, I think Harry Ann will hold her seat. She's very well liked down there.
I've
pretty
seen
popular.
polling on her. It's pretty strong.
It's pretty stout.
But you'll see that. Some of the internal struggles, the Republican Party is divided. There's no doubt about that. You'll see a minority of the Republicans, my guess is in both houses, both the House and the Senate, form sort of a coalition where anything that has to pass goes through them. They'll end up being very powerful.
What about Means up in Gaston? They say he might can win that seat up there.
I think he probably will.
So that could be a Democratic
flip
pickup.
the other way.
That could be a Democratic pickup.
I think that could be a Democrat.
So either way, it's going to be about 24-10.
Give or take, yeah.
The most interesting thing might be the speaker's race.
It will be. I think that's going to be the biggest thing. And if something happens over in Lee County, I don't see how someone who is under indictment can win a thing. But if he does not become indicted over there, it
He'll
could
be
be
pretty
story.
strong. I mean, if he survives that, he'll be very strong.
If he survives this investigation, he'll be the strongest player in Alabama political history.
Yeah. Although, I'll say this much about that in closing. I think just the publicity has hurt his future statewide politics. I think it even transcends this. I think we've talked about this in your radio show. People have a hard time with name ID. I think the best race this year will be Attorney General with Joe Hubbard against Luther Strange. I think Joe Hubbard could have a chance as a Democrat in that race. But I think Joe Hubbard is actually hurt by Mike Hubbard.
Well, that's a good point, and you're not the first to suggest that name might be a detriment to him.
People have heard the name Hubbard, and everything they hear the last year and a half has been negative. This guy's doing this and this, even the last few minutes, the last few days. We could get in that all day long. I want y'all to come back, but folks, our time's up.
Well, thank you for having us. It's been great.
Tell our viewers again the radio show, if you would. Y'all go ahead and tell them the radio.
93.1 in Montgomery, WACV Talk Radio. It's on Monday through Friday from
9 to noon.
9 to noon.
Barron Coleman and Jack Campbell, great political consultants, great political minds, and y'all be sure and tune in to their radio show, and hope you'll tune in again next week for Alabama Politics. Thank you for watching.